and I think that's a good way to sort of jump into it. That USADA UFC program just put out sort of a lot of their data, a lot of their information via Josh Gross of The Athletic. Luckily, I'm a subscriber of it. Anthony is not. Trash. Go support journalism, Anthony.
No, no. And I got love for Josh, man.
Of
Josh
course, Josh is a
Gross
home.
is the
OG.
home. He's a great guy. Great
OG.
guy. Kind of a de facto mentor for us as far as us looking up to his work before we got involved in media. So
he doesn't know that for sure. That he's a mentor to us, but he is. He's a mentor to a lot of MMA media people.
He's an OG. Like you got to respect Josh Gross.
Absolutely. He come out and said that USADA has conducted roughly 13,000 tests under the UFC anti-doping program. Around 100 fighters have tested positive. Half related to tainted supplements, according to Jeff Nowitzki. So I want to put that in a pure percentage here. 0.7%. Not 7%, not 17%, not 1%. 0.7% of all USADA UFC tests have resulted in a positive test. Less than 1%. And then half of that is due to tainted supplements, per USADA themselves. And the article itself is a long-form article. Definitely recommend it. And does a really good job of actually juxtaposing the Neil Magny case, for example, the one that you brought up, and this case, and how even Neil Magny got completely screwed over in respect to the ruling that we now see that should be precedent with Nate Diaz here, right? Similar to John Jones and pulsing now being a precedent that USADA and Jeff Nowitzki have now set for themselves. The Nate Diaz case is now a precedent that they themselves have set and that they themselves have to keep to because they said it, not anyone else. But Jeff Nowitzki has come out and actually set maybe another standard and paradigm shift in PED regulation. And to the very end of this article, again, scroll down here. It's the last two paragraphs. Okay, but it's highly important. Luke Thomas, shout out to Luke Thomas, another one of those OGs, de facto mentors to a lot of us. I did a great video on this as well. I'm going to do my best to delve into it and my thoughts on it. But this is what it has to say. For many years, the onus of, quote, strict liability fell on the fighters, meaning they were the ones responsible for what was in their bodies. Now, Nowitzki and the UFC are arguing that in some cases, the burden must shift from the athlete to the testing authority. Quote now from Jeff Nowitzki. Maybe 10 or 15 years ago when the labs could only detect at the nanogram level, you didn't see as much contaminants in the world, that policy was appropriate. In this day and age, with those two things happening, the low limits of detection and increased contaminants in our world, I don't think strict liability is the appropriate answer. And guys, I really want to emphasize how significant of a statement this is. Now, Jeff Nowitzki is not a spokesperson for USADA. He is a spokesperson for the USADA UFC program. I want to make that very clear here. So this is not official USADA policy. This is not an official shift of WADA policy, even though WADA is voting on policy shifts in, I think, the next few months. And one of them being levels on SARMs, because there is right now no threshold that allows a certain level of SARMs in your system. They're voting on that coming up via WADA. And since USADA is a WADA-accredited agency, whatever WADA votes on, USADA will probably follow suit or risk not being a WADA-accredited agency, which would risk their IOC usage. But digressing from that, the idea of strict liability is that no matter what is in your system, you are liable for it. Point blank, end of story. Okay? And this would routinely fall this would be the base level sentence for guys that maybe we get the 6-month suspension, the 3-month suspension, the base level suspensions, right? Because look, it's strict liability. We have to give you something here, right? And for a lot of those contaminated supplements, they were under this strict liability paradigm, so therefore they had to receive something, a la Neil Magny. Neil Magny still received a 6-month suspension. Okay? Nate Diaz is not receiving any suspension. He is allowed to fight, and that decision was made within 24 hours. Okay? Obviously, the paradigm and the window is shifting. And the idea that strict liability, the bedrock of PED regulation, okay, when WADA was initiated and formed in 1999, that was the founding principle. It's literally in the second paragraph. Like you have the first paragraph, which just states what WADA is, and the second one, it's the first sentence emphasizes strict liability. And that is a foundational aspect and principle of PD regulation worldwide. And if that is no longer the paradigm, then what's the point of this? What's the point of the current form of PD regulation? Because the current form of PD regulation is under strict liability and under that bedrock. And if you have a guy of Jeff Nowitzki's clout coming out there and saying, look, in your drinking water, we're finding SARMs. We're finding Osterin in drinking water now. Like, at some point, like, what are we supposed to do here? Like, it's not even at, like, your, like, GNC muscle building supplements. Yeah. You're finding it in every store of supplements now. You're finding contamination. How do we fix this now? How do we police this now? And it's a impoliceable situation. And with the current giant net over the ocean trying to collect as much fish as possible, as much PD users as possible, this giant net that's being used, it's a giant waste of time. A la the USADA UFC program, and even the USADA boxing usage that was more prominent back in the day. I remember Brian Campbell, I think, pointed out this statistic. 1,500 tests were conducted by USADA between the years of, I want to say, 2008 to 2015, I want to say.
Yeah, it was like one person caught?
One person was caught. One person. Yeah. So, obviously, this is at least in its current form, it's a giant waste of time.
It's a complete joke. I mean, I will say that I do like the fact that this science is evolving, or policy is evolving around the science. Mm-hmm. I do like that. Like, as you said before, the way they've gone about this has been piss poor backwards. Mm-hmm. And I think we had a very good example of this. Another time you and I were together at an event, UFC 232 was the perfect example of something that the science supports certain things happening, but the way it was done, good Lord, you're talking about horribly mismanaged. I don't know what the solution is, but I do know that this is not working. This is clearly not working. I mean, I don't think any one of us is naive enough to believe that everyone who didn't fall into the 0.7% of tests that actually, found genuine cheaters, like, oh, everyone else is clean and honest. I don't think that's
is this now proof, because look, 13,000 is a huge sample size. Is it now proof that only 0.7% or 1% of the sport uses PEDs?
Yeah, that's laughable. That's totally laughable. It's ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous. And then also too, if USADA is kind of manipulated by the UFC to do certain things and make sure certain matchups happen, what's the point? What is the point? If you're going to have a Brock Lesnar test and you're just going to let him fight, and then it comes out later.
Where's the thing that I think that people, still fail to frame the conversation is that the USADA program is a particular situation. Okay, it's like, I think people think that, like, Jeff Nowitzki is a USADA employee.
He's a UFC employee who used to work for USADA.
And USADA does not make decisions. They're a collection agency, so they often don't make decisions. Okay, for example, like WADA, USADA, WADA, these organizations often do not make the call on suspensions. They don't. It's who licenses these fighters, who promotes these fighters. These are often the agencies that will suspend a fighter, or for boxing, the sanctioning body would be another institution that could, right? They have jurisdiction, so to speak, because they sanction the fight. But USADA is not out there, I think, making calls. They're not. It's Jeff Nowitzki and the USADA UFC program. And what that means is that it's UFC employees controlling the outflow of cash to USADA to fund testing. And then USADA is the one that, once they have the funds, they can determine where it goes to, who they test, how much it goes to. But then if someone pops, they send it back to the USADA UFC program, and they make the call on what happens with that test, because they have jurisdiction. It's not USADA per se. I think that's where people fail to understand this how the system works. Like VADA, USADA, WADA, whatever, UCAD for UK Anti-Doping Agency, they aren't the ones making the determinations most of the time. It's the bodies that license the fighters, that sanction the fighters. Those are the bodies that will often make the determinations. And in the UFC's case, it's the UFC USADA program. So it's Jeff Nowitzki and anyone else that works with him within that program. And like you said, they aren't USADA employees, they're UFC employees. And I want to make that determination clear here. Because if you're just a collection agency and this is how the contract is set up and you just are supposed to deliver the test and they're the ones that make the determination, I mean, what do you do here? You know? I forget the president of USADA. I forget his name. Excuse me. But do you excuse me? Do you just wow? Do you just? I'm good. Would you like terminate this contract because it hurts your reputation, even though like it's not your call in some aspect with what is happening with these positive tests? You get what I'm saying here? Like,
yeah, I get what you're saying. The thing is, I know I give all the credit to Pat Auger, of Body Lock and Sherdog for his insight on this, and this is something he brought up on Unleashed this week. You know, when I'm saying that, like, yeah, this could be the death blow of USADA, the USADA UFC partnership.
I know what you mean by that. I know what you mean by yes.
Yeah, but at least as we know it to be now, he's like, well, USADA ain't going nowhere because this is a layer of legal protection for the UFC. If someone dies in the cage, and I should rephrase that, when someone dies in the cage, when there is a death in the UFC can say, hey, well, we tried. You know, if that and the person who was at the hand was the cause of that death, they say if that person's loaded up on juice, they say, hey, we tried. We did everything we could, and we throw X amount of dollars per year on this program, and everyone's randomly tested, and they got to they got to tell where they are in this little app, and we got this whole program laid out, and this guy cheated, therefore he's responsible. That's what this represents, and this also a prestige thing. Okay, we are the most drug tested sport in the world. Probably even outside the Olympics. So USADA's not going anywhere. Pat was definitely right on that assessment, or at least a comprehensive drug testing program is not going anywhere. But if we are to take this seriously, if we are to believe this has any merit, I mean, they have to at least fake transparency.
I will say this though, USADA does do fake transparency. Like I know, like, hey, UFC guys and fans, like I know you guys sometimes live in like a bubble here where you think like the sky is falling all the time, but USADA and how transparent they are comparative to, let's say, VADA or UCAD is completely different. Like I can go to USADA's webpage and see how many times people have been tested. I can go to, John Jones' name and see how many times he's been tested this year. I can't do that for UCAD. I can't do that for VADA.
It's just on the honor system. Take our word for it. We did it.
Yeah, honestly, they're saying like this person's within the system, but that's it. That's what they're saying. Like if I go to VADA's page right now, and I implore anyone to try this, do it, and look at, I forget, like I think it's a fighters tab, I think it's what it would be called, right? And you can see all the fighters that are currently in the program, and you may get like a vague timetable for when they're in the program, but you won't get any testing numbers, you won't get anything like that. So, yes, USADA, and I want to emphasize the USADA UFC program specifically lacks transparency. But USADA, comparative to other collection agencies, to isolate that just to collection agencies, they're actually far more transparent than others, to be honest, which is surprising. But it's not saying much. They're just more transparent than the others. It's not saying that they are transparent, just more so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always amazed at how much, being involved in mixed martial arts media, like all these weird things you have to start learning about in order to just keep up with the current news. And I've learned a lot about steroids, but I still have no idea what I'm talking about on a lot of this stuff because it is that complex and the science is evolving. So I am, like I said, I'm happy to see there's some evolution in how this is being done. that they're, because we have like with contaminants just in general, like, you say like a $20 bill has trace amounts of cocaine on it,
Oh yeah,
and drinking like tap water has trace amounts of painkillers and whatnot, that things that get thrown in the ocean all the time and stuff like that, especially out here, especially in Southern California, that we get contaminants in things because of people being reckless with the environment and whatnot. So it does make sense to think that,
absolutely.
yeah, a totally unregulated and ridiculously archaic supplement industry is responsible for putting a lot of contaminants back out in the world.
And it's not even just that. Like that's just the tip of the iceberg. Like these substances are found all over the place in everyday use at times as well. Even though it's on a ban list for fighting in sports, doesn't mean a lot of these things are banned for usage. Period. So you find it end up in household items and stuff, and people throw it down the drain, as you said, right? And it ends up in the water system. And that happens for decades and decades and decades. And then you have a contaminated water system and water supply. You have contaminated food. You have contaminated, and again, supplement system, which is just a completely unregulated industry, as you said. It's just a huge issue that, again, the current form of PD regulation is just not capable of dealing with. And actually, most of the time, seems to mischaracterize what they're finding because of this new world, this new contaminated world in a sense.